She's mafia. To the outside world, she's a villain. Don't help her. If you do, you're fired. One day, a woman was rushed to the hospital where I work in critical condition. As I moved to assist the severely ill woman, Director Hamilton came running in, yelling at me to abandon her. "It's all on you personally. This will be the end of your medical career. Ha, tough luck." The day after I risked my job to save her life, a luxury car was parked in front of the hospital, and a line of men in black suits stood waiting. I'm John Miller, just an everyday emergency physician. The job of an emergency physician has become known as cool and impressive thanks to being depicted in dramas and movies. But if nothing happens, it's not that busy a job. However, once an accident occurs, it gets busier than any drama could depict. When many emergency cases are brought in, used gauze gets thrown on the floor, and harsh words fly around at the scene. It gets so noisy that voices can't be heard, people bump into each other, and stumble over carts carrying equipment. In such life-saving scenarios, hierarchies hardly matter. Even I would follow orders from a junior if they were best positioned to instruct. What we emergency physicians always prioritize is saving our patients. So, it's perfectly normal for me to assist a junior who is managing a patient. But that's only during busy times. Normally, even as doctors, our jobs are not much different from office workers. We're not doing sales or paperwork, but it involves the same sort of mundane office life. I've been in the emergency medical team at this hospital for 20 years, and that hasn't changed. Emergency medicine is so busy that interns often request transfers to other departments, but I've been committed to this field for all these 20 years. That's why I'm considered a veteran. Good morning, Mr. Hamilton. As I spot Director, Mr. Hamilton, I stand to greet him. While it's good to make daily rounds and check on the hospital's status, it seems that Mr. Hamilton's purpose is somewhat different. The director's name is Tyler Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton's primary concern is simply whether something makes money or not. Though the hospital must be run as a business, I fundamentally disagree with his approach. Despite holding a medical license, Mr. Hamilton often acts in a manner unbecoming of a physician. I hear we had a traffic accident victim yesterday. How is she? One patient sustained severe head injuries and is in the ICU, still unconscious. Another suffered significant fractures and lacerations in the thigh and will be monitored here today before potentially being transferred to surgery if there are no complications. Emergency departments typically don't keep patients long. That would be the case in any hospital. That's fine then. Mr. Hamilton replies and then leaves, apparently having lost interest. We doctors, and even the nurses, cast doubtful glances at his retreating back. Why do we have to be so mindful of Mr. Hamilton? We doctors working on the front lines are driven by a single-minded desire to save our patients. When a patient recovers and says thank you with a smile at discharge, it feels rewarding and makes all the effort worthwhile. This joy is something only those in medical professions can truly understand. And seeing such patient faces inspires us to keep working hard to help others today. My decision to pursue medicine was triggered by my mother's accident. When I was a child, my mother died in an accident right before my eyes. As she was crossing the street, a speeding motorcycle hit her as she shielded me with her body. I was left with only minor injuries, but my mother was struck down, bleeding profusely, and motionless. By then, my father had already passed away, leaving me completely alone. It was my grandparents who reached out to me then. My maternal grandparents were incredibly kind, showering me with all the love. I believe they loved me enough to immediately fill the void left by not having my parents around. Therefore, I can confidently say that I am happy. Still, there are times when the moment I lost my mother flashes back. At that time, I was too young to do anything. I didn't know what to do. and I was just crying. Without calling an ambulance, I clung to my unresponsive mother. I hated and felt pathetic about myself, unable to do anything as my mother's body grew colder and disappeared. That's why I decided to become a doctor. I no longer wanted to just stand by helplessly, calling out to someone who had collapsed. If I ever found myself in a similar situation again, I would want to be able to help, no matter what. That feeling grew stronger as I got older. Grandpa, I have a request. For that, I first needed knowledge and skills. I faced my grandparents with a serious expression and straightened my back. What's wrong, John? Grandpa responded seriously to my tone. I want to become a doctor. I know it's expensive to go to med school, and it's tough. I feel bad for asking for more money after you took me in, but I really want to become a doctor. John, I will definitely pay you back once I become a doctor. Please let me go to med school. I pleaded right there. All right, John, do as you please. Grandpa, are you sure? Of course, you are our dear grandson. We wouldn't dream of standing in the way of your dream. Exactly, John, do your best. Both my grandparents supported me. I must have been a really costly grandchild. I've caused them a lot of trouble, but I'm nothing but grateful. That's why I studied hard and learned medicine. I will definitely become a doctor, and if Grandpa or Grandma ever get seriously ill, I will be there to help them. I won't just stand by as I did when my mother died. I can't bear to lose another loved one. With that determination, I was able to successfully obtain my medical license. However, the director of the hospital I joined, Mr. Hamilton, was hardly what you'd call a good man. His policy included discharging patients as soon as possible. It wasn't because we were busy with waiting patients. There are several advantages to freeing up beds quickly, but the primary reason is probably for financial gain. Empty beds mean new patients can be admitted. As patients are cycled through, money keeps moving. Basically, it seems he wants as many people as possible to spend money. From the beginning, Mr. Hamilton was solely focused on profit. Of course, if patients are well, it's fine to discharge them, but it can be problematic when we want to monitor them a bit longer. Normally, patients stay until stitches are removed after surgery. Post-operative conditions can change unexpectedly. That's why we want them to rest. But Mr. Hamilton suggests discharging them just 2 days after surgery. We argue it's unreasonable, but he retorts, "What? Just make them come for outpatient visits." I was shocked that a doctor could make such a statement. Of course, outpatient care might suffice in some cases, but some patients might need hospitalization due to their home environments or physical conditions. Mr. Hamilton might think a postoperative condition is just that, but it's reckless to say so without listening to the attending doctor's opinion. This is my hospital. Don't defy my decisions. Understand? Every time, I sigh at the statements Mr. Hamilton makes. Especially appalling was his remark the other day. Drive away any patient who's even slightly off. He said calmly and boldly. What does he mean by an off patient? These are people who come to the hospital because they are ill or injured. What a thing to say. Some patients may become disoriented due to a head injury or act out due to their condition worsening. Nurses approach these cases with great care, and doctors focus on treatment. Everyone is dedicated to thinking of the patient's welfare, yet Mr. Hamilton, of all people, should never say something like dismissing them. The duty of a doctor is to support his patients to the very end. Despite being a terrible director, this hospital is the largest in the region. Working at this hospital also serves to reassure my grandparents. Today, too, I'm heading to work at that hospital. Regardless of Mr. Hamilton, there are patients waiting for me. My job is to treat them and see them healthy and discharge. John, you can go for lunch now if you're ready. All right. Go when you can. The patients are stable, and we can handle anything that comes up with the doctors you are staying. Have a good lunch. The set A is recommended today. Hearing my colleagues, I decided to take a lunch break. Usually, I hardly ever get a break, so I grab whatever quick snacks like donuts or a sandwich that I can eat with one hand. Sometimes, the situation is just stuffing myself whenever I get the chance to eat, so being able to sit down for a meal is a luxury. Considering that, I really got to enjoy my meal today. The combo I was recommended was a steak with some French fries, which I savored thoroughly. But as I was finishing my meal and heading back, an emergency call came in. I rushed to the emergency entrance just as the ambulance arrived. A junior waiting there briefed me on the situation. The patient is a woman in her 40s. She was hit by a car, and is bleeding from her head. She's unconscious. An accident? I'm not sure, but she's the only one brought in. Seeing the woman being taken out of the ambulance on a stretcher, I instinctively frowned. She was wearing a dress so clearly expensive and elegant that even a layperson could tell it's high quality. The bleeding from her head was bandaged, and I could see a severe laceration as they moved her into the examination room. Her leg also seemed to be bent in an odd direction. My mother. It instantly reminded me of the day my mother died. As a doctor, I shouldn't let personal feelings get in the way, but I couldn't help seeing my mother in this patient. I was determined to save her at all costs. With more resolve than usual, I prepared to transfer her. Okay, let's move her, 1, 2, 3. We coordinated our movements and transferred the patient. Since we couldn't cut the dress, the nurse quickly unstitched the seam under the arm, removed the garment, and checked the heartbeat. Attaching a heart rate monitor, we checked the readings. The heart rate shows no abnormalities. So, there likely isn't any internal damage for now. I was just thinking about stopping the bleeding on her head and then proceeding with a detailed examination when I heard footsteps thundering towards us. Wait! Don't interfere with that patient. Mr. Hamilton burst in just as I was about to start controlling the bleeding. We involuntarily stopped our hands, but this injury was urgent and needed immediate treatment. Naturally, the involved doctors began to feel bewildered. What are you talking about? If we leave her like this, it could endanger her life. Don't joke with me. Director Hamilton retorted with a flushed face to my objection. That patient is the wife of a mafia boss from down the hill. It's clear that getting involved will lead to trouble later. What? What is he even talking about? Is Mr. Hamilton trying to dismiss the patient right in front of us with just the excuse of trouble? How can we abandon a patient who is seeking help right now? What are you saying? Just stitch her up. And you, call the CT room. Yes. I instinctively issued orders. We can't just leave her untreated. Hey, can't you hear me telling you to stop? Mr. Hamilton is always like this. People who dislike trouble are one thing, but even when a life is at stake. If that's the case, he better relinquish his medical license quickly. Helping a mafia woman could jeopardize my position. Is that all Mr. Hamilton cares about? What was the purpose of becoming a doctor in the first place? I can't understand his thinking, choosing his ugly desire to remain on top over helping a patient who is seeking help. Do you understand? She's mafia. To the outside world, she's a villain. It doesn't matter. Anyone who helps a villain is a villain too. We don't need villains in this hospital. If you insist on helping her, you're fired. He even went as far as to say such tyrannical lines. Fine then. If this hospital can't save patients who seek help, then I might as well quit. There's no reason to cling to this place. It might upset my grandparents, But if I can't help this woman now, what was the point of becoming a doctor? Understood. What? I'll take responsibility and resign. So, let me provide life-saving treatment to this woman. I declared firmly and started treating the woman. Mr. Hamilton probably couldn't understand me. He looked at me with disbelief. You heard what I said just now. Whatever happens, it's all on you. Mr. Hamilton threw these words at me and left the treatment room. Even after Mr. Hamilton left, not a single junior doctor or nurse tried to leave the scene. John is not wrong. That's right, John is the best emergency physician. Their support was a relief. All right, let's continue the treatment. Yes. Afterward, we treated the woman with all our might. Her condition eventually stabilized. Upon contacting her family, it appeared that this woman really was the wife of a mafia family. The patient's name is Isabella. She is still connected to tubes, and this situation remains critical. Yet, seeing her breathe on her own, I felt a profound sense of relief. John. Then, Mr. Hamilton came back. As you said earlier, you'll take full responsibility for that patient. Handle all the criticism from the public yourself. You are responsible for her until she is discharged. I intended to do that from the beginning. This marks the end of your medical career. Ha, tough luck. With a snort, Mr. Hamilton glanced at the sleeping patient and left the room. I realized it was already dark outside. Tonight turned out to be another overtime shift. As I was getting ready to leave, a nurse named Natalie approached me. She has been a steadfast veteran ever since she joined the emergency department. John. Natalie. John, please don't quit. Her words caught me off guard. It's okay. You know that other doctors here are good people, even if Mr. Hamilton is not, right? Smiling with a sense of relief, I replied and slowly left the hospital. The next day, when I arrived at work, there was a luxury car parked in the hospital's parking lot that was clearly recognizable to anyone. A black luxury car. It's not the first time a wealthy person has come to this hospital, and since we have VIP rooms, it's rather a common sight. Normally, seeing a luxury car parked wouldn't surprise me, but what was surprising was next to it. Despite the considerable distance from the parking lot to the hospital entrance, a line of men in black suits stood. Their hands clasped behind their backs, chests buffed out, creating a striking scene that was indeed surprising. What's going on? Both I and other staff members, along with outpatients, were looking on curiously from a distance. It seemed not to be causing any issues at the moment, but I thought I'd have to intervene if it started affecting the patients. With that in mind, I entered the hospital. John, good morning. Good morning. Are the patients settled? Yes, they are. My first concern was the impact on the patients. Some patients should not be excited unnecessarily, so we can't let our guard down. About Isabella. What about her? Well, those men in black suits out front, they seem to be her entourage here to visit her. So, the family of the mafia is here, then? While I was concerned that Mr. Hamilton might make a fuss, as the attending physician, I decided to go and greet them. There were many things to discuss with the family about her injuries, and what to expect moving forward. When I visited the room, many eyes glared at me, but when I introduced myself as the attending physician, they all greeted me in turn. Isabella's husband, Vincent, thanked me profusely. Thank you. My wife's survival is all thanks to you. You are a lifesaver for her, he said. It's good to hear she's doing well, I responded. While the term mafia might not conjure a good image, Vincent was glad for Isabella's safety and able to express his gratitude to the doctor who saved her. What makes him different from an ordinary person? I thought he was more principled than Mr. Hamilton here. Vincent, This Dr. Miller is a wonderful doctor. Is that so? Yo, that's great. Isabella had regained consciousness, and though she was not yet allowed to move much, she was slowly talking with her husband, Vincent. Dr. Miller, I was conscious when I was brought in yesterday. What? I didn't have the strength to open my eyes, but I was aware. So, I heard your conversation with that Mr. Hamilton. I'm sorry you had to hear such an unpleasant conversation. Such a conversation was not something pleasant for a patient to hear, especially at her most vulnerable moment. It could only have had a negative impact on her. What do you mean? Director of this hospital, Mr. Hamilton told everyone to abandon me. He said helping a mafia woman would only bring trouble, Isabella explained. What? Vincent's voice deepened with anger. It was to be expected. What husband in the world would remain calm when his wife is for such reasons? Dr. Miller here opposed that directly. Even when threatened with being fired from the hospital, he treated me like any other patient, she continued. Hearing the truth, Vincent's face filled with rage. Typical of a mafia boss. The aura, or rather the atmosphere in the room, changed abruptly. I was overwhelmed by the intense pressure. So, that director, Mr. Hamilton, was going to abandon you? Yes. It was good that we were in a private room. If other patients were exposed to this pressure, it might have caused more than just fainting. But the pressure suddenly lifted. Vincent then approached me with a gentle smile. You are truly a good person, so? He whispered the name of a hospital in my ear. Then he firmly grasped my hands with both of his, and as I felt the warmth, I looked up to meet Vincent's kindly smiling eyes. Months later, I am now working at another hospital. Although the previous one was large, this one is much bigger and incomparable. Apparently, Isabella used to work as a physician at this hospital before she met Vincent, who was a patient here, and decided to join the mafia life with him. She still maintains a good friendship with Mr. Stanton, the director of this hospital. Mr. Stanton, who values saving lives above all, was eager to hire someone like me, who would rescue anyone, regardless of their background. Therefore he hired me right away. As it turns out, due to Isabella and Director Stanton's connection, everything about Mr. Hamilton came to light. The rumors are that he will lose his position by the end of the year. Though not conclusive evidence, when I left the hospital, Mr. Hamilton was seen visiting Isabella, still hospitalized. I'm terribly sorry. He apologized deeply. Although Vincent and some young people were there visiting, no one forgave him. Well, that's to be expected. And I heard that Mr. Hamilton's wife has left him too. Without his position as director, who will help him when he needs it? Given his past behavior, it's likely no one would. But if I were there, I would choose to help him. Honestly, part of me thinks, why bother helping someone like him? But I'm not in a position to choose who to save based on whether I like them or not. I am a doctor. As someone dedicated to saving lives, that's something I must never forget. I still regret that I couldn't do anything to save my mother. But sometimes, I receive messages from patients who have been discharged saying, I'm doing well now. I bring those messages to my parents' grave to report. I have become someone who can save this many people. Mom and Dad, you were wonderful parents, and I am so grateful. And then's another thing I report. At this age, I've found a girlfriend. She's the nurse, Natalie, who was the first to ask me not to quit. Today, she came with me to visit the grave and said, from now on, I will be the one to support John. Embarrassingly, I blushed and replied, hey, supporting is my job. Then we smiled at each other and held hands tightly.